one of the things that you can know about me is that I absolutely love really large gatherings. Like I love going where there's like masses of people. I think it is absolutely just hilarious because like you go to like the state fair, right? The state fair comes up at the end of the summer. The Renaissance Festival. Sometimes we'll bring our kids to the Mall of America, and there's like just masses of people at Mall of America. You've been to that, or like a sporting event, like the Vikings game or a Twins game or Timberwolves game. Come on, we need them to come back. I think those are so, but even things like conferences, like if you've ever been to like a big conference at a big conference center, I think those are, but the reason that I love these massive events is not typically for like the event itself, but I love people watching. Anyone else love people watching? I think it is, when you have like that many people gathered together in the same place and you just sit back and watch what they do, I think it is so funny for me, because I'm a dad with kids, I love watching how dads interact with their kids because some dads are just ready to lose it. And other dads are like, yeah, this is so much fun. I love it. I think it's absolutely hilarious. I love how the different generations engage with like the same kinds of things and how different people from different generations will like respond to the same situations. One of my most recent like favorite places to go that are like kind of bigger places are college campuses. And the reason why I love college campuses is because it's like the only place on the planet where you'll have just tons of people with like headphones or like ear pods in, and they're all singing whatever is in their headphones, just screaming it out, and nobody cares. Nobody cares at all. Everyone's just singing. I think it is absolutely fascinating. I love these big gatherings, but one of the things that I've as you sit and you people watch, you recognize that even in these like massive gatherings of people, you've got all these people from all these different places, right? They're gathered to be in the same experience. They're all in the same environment, and yet they're all completely disconnected from one another. Have you seen that before? Like you've recognized, you probably felt that before. We live in a world today where there are more opportunities to connect with people all around the world than ever before in the history of the world. And yet 1 in 4 people report being lonely right now. That at any given time, 1 in 4 people report being lonely. 1 in 3 people say that they are lonely on any given week. Isn't that wild? I mean, we can be in a mass number of people. We can be surrounded in a crowd of people and yet still feel completely alone. We are in this conversation, this series together that we're calling Together We. And what we're doing is we're having this conversation around the things that God has invited us as a family, as a church family, to participate in together, that we practice these things individually, but we practice them corporately too. So if you've missed the first couple of weeks, we talked about how together we practice the 2 questions, that we have these 2 questions here in our worship center, right? Lord, what do you want to say to me? And Lord, how do you want me to respond? That together we are practicing posturing ourselves to hear from the living God. That we've talked about how together we engage in the vision of Bridgewood, how together we are building a safe place to be with and become like Jesus. We've talked about how together we pray, and how together we read the Bible, we engage the scriptures relationally. And if you've missed any of those messages or any of those conversations we've had in the past couple of weeks, I want to encourage you, jump onto our website, jump onto YouTube or Facebook, go back and watch those and catch up because they've been absolutely fantastic. But today I want to have a different conversation. I want to have a conversation about how together we are a community that refuses to just be a crowd of people who feel completely disconnected from each other. Today I want to have a conversation about a non-negotiable that we have about being part of this family here, about how together we connect. I want to talk about what it looks like to connect together. And we're gonna start in a particular part of the Bible that is going to seem really disconnected from this idea of connecting, but I promise you it will paint a picture we're going to get there, okay? So just hang with me. So in this scripture, we're in Matthew 16, and to like the start of this, Jesus is with his disciples, Okay, and he's starting to get a little bit famous. People are starting to know who Jesus is, right? He's starting to gather crowds of people around him, and people are starting to talk and recognize this Jesus character. And so Jesus gathers his disciples together, and he says, okay, all of these people, like, who do they say I am? Right? Jesus is kind of like, are they getting it? And so the disciples are like, well, here's what we're hearing, Jesus. Like, we're hearing, some people think that you're just John the Baptist, right? And some people think that you're a prophet, right? Or even you're one of the Old Testament guys. Like, the people think that that's you. And then Jesus kind of pauses that conversation and says, okay, but who do you say that I am? Talking to his disciples. And this is where we're going to pick up this conversation. Jesus, he says to his disciples, but who do you say that I am? And Simon Peter, one of the disciples, replied, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus answered him, blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah. For flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. You see, what Jesus is saying here is not like, hey, Peter, I'm going to build my church on you. He's talking about, like, Peter, this thing that you just said that about who I am, I'm going to build my church on that. That I'm going to build my church on the reality that Jesus is the Messiah, that he is the Son of the living God, that on that declaration, Jesus is going to build his church. Now, I want to back up here a little bit and get a little bit nerdy, but I promise you it's going to be helpful, okay? When Jesus says he's going to build his church, in the original language, right, like the Bible, this part of the Bible is written in Greek. The word there is not church. The word there is this word ecclesia. Jesus says, I'm going to build my ecclesia. And this word ecclesia, it means like an assembly of people or like a gathering of people. And ecclesia is not a religious word. It's just a really common word that people would use, right? You can have an ecclesia of men or an ecclesia of women and an ecclesia of soldiers, right? It's a group of people gathered together around a singular purpose. And Jesus says, I'm gonna build my ecclesia. This is what Jesus is talking about. So it begs the question, so why do we use the word church? That's such a great question. I'm so glad you asked. Wow. This word church, okay, I can give you the long story, but I'm going to keep this really short. This word church is an English translation of a German translation of the Greek word kuriakos. Okay, kuriakos is where we get this word church. And kuriakos, it's actually used a couple times in the Bible. But it really exploded. It became this big word that was used about 300 years after Jesus' resurrection. You see, what happened is that these ecclesias, these gatherings of Jesus followers, started to pop up all over the place. And they started to gather in different locations, in people's homes, and in old temples, and in like the community courtyards. And they needed a word to describe the place where these ecclesias were gathering. And they used the word kuriakos, where we get the word church. That in a very kind of practical way, this word church, where we now get our word church is simply just the container for ecclesia to happen. Right? And kuriakos, church, that can look any which way. Now, what Jesus came to build was an ecclesia, right? Which kind of begs the question, like, why does this matter? Like, why, Brian, what are we doing here? Here's why this matters. Is because Jesus didn't come to build a container, right? That's not what Jesus came to do. He came to build an ecclesia, a gathering of people who would say Jesus is the Son of the living God. To put it a little bit differently, what Jesus came to do, what Jesus came to build was relational. He came to build community. He came to build a gathering of folks who would come together and experience life together, would share life together. And here's what I think is so powerful about this, is that Jesus says, I've come to build my ecclesia, right? And he says, and the gates of hell won't be able to prevail against it. If you look throughout the scriptures, there are really only two other times where hell couldn't prevail against something. That was keeping Jesus in the grave, and someday when Jesus comes back. And Jesus says, hey, when you, ecclesia, when you gather together in my name, hell will not be able to prevail against that. That in a very real way, that when we choose to ecclesia, when we choose to connect together in community, we become a living expression of the living Jesus. That this is what Jesus invites us into, to ecclesia. That it's not when we step into the church that we're doing what Jesus has called us to do, right? It's when we step into community, when we step into ecclesia. That's the thing that Jesus invites you and I into when we begin to follow him. So what does it look like to ecclesia? What does it look like to be a community of people gathered in Jesus' name, right? Like that's the next kind of logical thing. Well, here at Bridgewood, when we talk about connection, when we talk about connecting with one another, the kind of short phrase that we use this is sharing life together. That's what we mean. When we say, hey, we want you to connect, what we mean is we want you to share life together. And this is very different than doing life together. Right? We do life with our coworkers, and we do life with people, right? But sharing your life with someone, that can look very different. Right? When you share your heart with someone, when you share your dreams with someone, if you're going through stuff and you share that with someone, right? Or even sharing your resources, sharing your home with someone. That's very different than just doing life together. Right? We're talking about sharing life together. And that's exactly what Jesus actually invites us into. If you're familiar with the Bible at all, Jesus was asked this one time, what is the greatest commandment? And it was, they were trying to test Jesus. There's like 600 and some odd commandments back in that time, and laws that people are supposed to follow. And they say, well, Jesus, what is the greatest commandment? And Jesus' answer was, well, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. Right? Love God and love others as you love yourself. And in this particular passage, at the end of it, it says, Jesus says, hey, these are the greatest commandments. And all the law and prophets depend on those commandments. Loving God and loving others as you love yourself. If I can maybe say it a little bit differently, love God, love others as you love yourself. Everything else is just application. Everything else is just application. And you see, when we engage in community, when we engage in ecclesia, when we share life together, that's what we're talking about. Love God, love others as you love yourself. Now, when we talk about love, we all have our own thoughts and ideas and opinion, and depending on the culture that you live in, and we get this idea of love, and it's all over the place. And God's smart. He knew this, right? So Jesus actually clarifies what he means by love. That Jesus, on the last night, he's with his disciples before he's going to be betrayed and crucified. He's with his people for the very last time, the very last night before he's about to die. And this is what he says to them. He gives them a new command, which on first glance doesn't seem like a new commandment. Right? Jesus says to his disciples, a new commandment, this is in John 13, a new commandment I give you, that you love one another. Well, we've heard this, right? Love God as you love others, right? We know this. Jesus isn't new. Love one another, but he says, just as I have loved you, you also are to love one another. And it's by this all people will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. I find this so fascinating that Jesus doesn't say, hey, people are going to know you're my disciple by how much you read your Bible. People aren't going to know that you're my disciple by how much time you spend in prayer. People are going to know that you're my disciple by how you love others. Isn't that fascinating? And here's how Jesus says it. If you want to love others the way that I've loved you. That's how we know what love is. And how has Jesus loved you? How has Jesus loved me? I mean, he's forgiven me. That's a big one. He's gracious to me. He enjoys just being with me and spending time with me. Right? He calls out the best in me. Right? We know what love is when we look at Jesus, and that's the invitation. Hey, when you ecclesia, when you connect together, love one another just like Jesus has loved you. Do that for each other. Now, in a very real way, this is like one of the most definitive ways that we express the image of God in us to the world, is when we choose to love others. That this is how people recognize that we follow Jesus, by how we love those around us. And now when Jesus resurrects from the grave and he ascends into heaven, he gives his Holy Spirit to his followers, and they begin to ecclesia. They begin to do this thing that Jesus came to build. They begin to share life together. And we actually get a picture of this in the book of Acts, chapter 2. And now if you're familiar with the Bible, this is going to maybe be a passage that you've heard before. If not, awesome. This is going to be fantastic. This is an invitation to get a picture of what ecclesia can look like. Now, as I read through this, I actually want you to pay attention to two things. I want you to look for two things as I read through this. We read through this, okay? The first thing I want you to look for are the different containers for ecclesia, okay? The first thing I want you to look for are the different, like, churches, the different gathering points that they come together and where they're together, okay? So I want you to look for the different containers. But the second thing I want you to look for is how they express loving God and loving others, okay? So I want you to look for where they gather and what they do, how they gather, okay? That's what I want you to look for as we read through this. So here we go. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles, and all the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. Did you catch the different containers? Did you catch the different places where they gathered? Right, first it said that all the believers were together. That all the believers were together. Now, there weren't maybe millions of them, but there was a lot of them, and they all gathered together. That would have been a massive gathering of people, a huge gathering. All of the believers were together. And what were they doing when they were together? Well, they were listening to the apostles' teaching. They were listening they were praying together. They were in prayer with one another, right? We see this massive gathering, this massive container, this massive church where they were all together. It also tells us that they were together in the temple courts. Now, the temple courts were still pretty big, but listen, all the believers can't fit in a temple court. These are a little bit smaller. Still a lot, but a little bit smaller, because you can do things in a little bit of a smaller gathering that you can't do when it's part of a massive crowd of people. And then where else did they meet? In their homes. How many people can you fit in your home? Not thousands, maybe not even hundreds, just a few people. And it was in these intimate spaces. What did they do? Well, they shared meals with one another. They prayed for one another. They got to share their needs with one another. Right? In all of these different settings, whether it was the masses or whether it was in these small gatherings, what they were doing was practicing ecclesia together. That they were connecting with one another. That they were loving God and loving others as they loved themselves together. This is what ecclesia can look like. Now, what is just experience like kind of shows us, and I think this is true for most people, is that connection typically begins at the larger gatherings, but they become more deep. We become more deeply connected together in those more intimate settings, where we can have real conversations, where we can actually hear each other out and not simply just pass by one another, but actually get to know each other and share life with each other. It usually starts big, but becomes a little bit more intimate and a little bit more intimate, and this is how we connect with one another. Now here at Bridgewood, we offer all kinds of opportunities for connection. We've helped create these different containers for community to happen, for connection to happen, for ecclesia to happen. The first obvious one is what we're doing right now, right? Sunday morning. These Sunday gatherings, what are we doing together? We come together. Sorry. Somebody got a bottle of water? Sorry. Jonathan, my man, he's here. You rock. Oh, look at this guy. Look at this guy. Thank you, Jonathan. Appreciate it. So, anyways, we have these Sunday gatherings, right? We've got these big gatherings. What do we do together? When we come together, we pray together. We listen to the Word together. We sing together, right? We receive offering together. We connect together, right? In these large gatherings together. But we also have a little bit more intimate settings, like different ministries, right? We've got like the youth ministries and the children's ministries. We've got men's ministry and women's ministries. Different opportunities that are a little bit of a smaller gathering, but there's still a lot of people there. People who maybe are like you, that you can come together and you can connect together, you can be with. Sorry. I can't get this tickle out. Somebody else got a bottle of water? Thank you. Brendan's on it. Leave it to the senior. Thanks, man. But we've got these ministries where you can connect with people who are kind of like you. And we've got even smaller connections. We've got classes where we can meet together in a classroom, right? And we can learn things together. We can connect together on a specific topic. Or we've got these connection experiences like Feed My Starving Children. Experiences designed specifically for connecting with each other. And these can be small things like, hey, we're going to go hiking together, to have a Bible study together, to things like Feed My Starving Children, right? Where we can go serve together. But we've got these different experiences, right? A little bit smaller. We've also got missions and serving opportunities, places for you to volunteer, teams of people that you can join and have accomplish something together. I cannot get rid of this scratch in my throat. Sorry. Matt, do you have any water back there? Worship team? Yeah, you guys always have water. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you. We got, what is this? What is a little, and a cough drop? Oh my goodness. He knows what's up here. Matt. Thank you. Yeah, you guys got, thank you. I mean, these people know how to serve. Thank you guys. Yeah, just leave it here. This is great. No, that's great. So and then we've also got these micro church experiences that are a little bit smaller, great, another bottle, great. These micro churches where they gather together in people's homes. Oh, Daniel, my man. Thank you, buddy. You drank most of it, but it's cool. I'll still take it. Thank you. Thank you. You see, I can have all kinds of water around me, right, in all sorts of different shapes and sizes and containers. But here's the reality, right? This scratch in my throat isn't going to go away until I have a sip. In the same way, here at Bridgewood, we can offer all kinds of different places for you to connect, in all kinds of different shapes and sizes, with all kinds of different people. And yet you can still just sit and be part of the crowd feeling completely disconnected and completely alone until you have a sip, until you choose to engage. I started following Jesus the summer going into my 9th grade year of high school. And I had three really good friends who invited me to come serve in the kids' ministry at the church. And back then, I didn't really care for kids at all. I mean, listen, I love my kids, but I don't care for kids. Like that just was not my jam. But listen, these are my three best friends, and they invited me to come serve in the kids' ministry, so that's what I did. I took a step in the direction of connection, and I served. Over time, I started to really enjoy getting to pour into these young kids and to youth, and And I started serving into the different kids' ministry. And the children's director at the time, her name was Deb. She saw something in me, a leadership gifting that no one had ever called out of me before. But she saw that, and she said, Brian, I want you to come to a leadership conference. A couple other volunteers were going to go on this trip. We're going to go to a leadership conference. And here's the deal. I didn't know anyone else going on that trip. But I decided to take a step in the direction of connection. And so I went on this trip. And we drove there, and we was going to spend a couple nights. We drove back. But on that trip, I met Noel, and I met Brett, and I met Jeremy. And these are the guys that showed me that faith just isn't, faith should be fun. It can be fun, but it should be fun. That following Jesus, it can be an absolute blast. We're at this conference, and they're running around, like, giving people high fives. There's like, hey, there's worship happening, but they're like up front in like a mosh pit jumping around. I've never seen this before. But because I went there, I experienced that faith can be so much fun. Eventually, these same guys, they invited me over to come hang out one night, and there's a ton of other people that are going to be there from church and from other places. Again, all people that I had no idea who these people were. But they invited me, and I decided to take a step in the direction of connection. And so I went there, and while I was there, I met all kinds of people. I met Nolan and Kenny and John. I met Michael, and I met Megan. I met Jen. And I met my wife, Abby. I met all these people. And I was there with and they were the most welcoming people I'd ever met. They made me feel like I was part of the group. They asked me questions. They engaged me in conversation. And I learned this is what connection can look like. In this huge group of people who cared about me. Eventually, some of the guys, they invited me to come live in a house with them. And I knew them, so I was like, okay, well, I'll take a step in the direction of connection. And while I was part of this house, we had Bible studies every Tuesday night, and I'd never studied the Bible. I'd never read the Bible like with people like that before. And so every week, I started to learn, this is how you engage in conversation. This is how we can have different ideas and different opinions about the Bible, and it's okay. And we can still connect and engage with one another. Eventually, because of this group of people who were so invested in my life, they saw a call into vocational ministry on my life. And so I started working in vocational ministry. And while I was there, I took a step in the direction of connection and started to connect with people who were kind of like me. And so I met people that I worked with, John and Jason and Terry, and I met other people in these other different networks. I met Brendan, I met Sharon, I met Rachel and Dan and Steve and Melinda, and I started to meet these different people from different opportunities because I was taking steps in the direction of connection. And eventually, I became the one who started inviting others to connect with me and connect with my people. And you see, when I have something to celebrate in my life now, guess who I'm sending texts to? Those people. When I'm going through a hard time, a hard season, and I could just use some prayer, or maybe I just need some help, guess who I'm reaching out to? When tragedy has struck my life, guess who were my first phone calls? It was those people. That these are the people that I can be completely real with, that I can be 100% transparent with. I can trust them. And we're not perfect. They're not perfect at this. They've hurt my feelings before, and I've hurt their feelings before. But at the end of the day, these are the people that I'm connected to in a deep kind of way. Because these are the people that as we, ecclesia together, these are the people that help me deepen my relationship with Jesus. That I'm learning how to love God and love others as I love myself because of these people. Because I'm connected with these people. You see, that's what we're inviting each and every one of you into. That in this family, when you're part of Bridgewood, we don't want you to just show up on a Sunday morning, deuces, I'm out of here, right? Like, hey, hi, and then we want to connect. Because that's the thing that Jesus came to build. And listen, we're all at different places, and that's great. And if the large gathering, like that's where you're at right now, great, connect in the large gathering. Man, if you're ready to take a step forward and connect a little bit more deeply, engage in one of the connection experiences. Get connected into a micro church. But what we want for you is to connect with people that you can share life with. Because that's the thing that Jesus invites us into. That's what Jesus came to build. And that's what we are building here as well. So as we close, I want to simply invite you into two things. And it's very, very simple. The first is I want to invite you to take a step in the direction of connection. That whatever that might look like for you, and I don't know, each and every one of you are in a different place. But what would it look like for you to take one step closer to connection? Right? Maybe that is really engaging in a connection experience or getting into a smaller, group of people into a micro church where you meet every week or every other. And maybe that is simply, hey, when we come and gather on a Sunday morning, you really take advantage of that time where we greet one another. And you're going to ask some deeper questions to people that you've met before. Maybe if you're online, maybe that means engaging people in the chat who are watching with you, who are engaging with you. I don't know what connection needs to look like for you, but here's my invitation, that you would take a step in the direction of connection. The second thing I want to invite you into is this, that if you've been part of Bridgewood for a long time, you feel like you are very connected to a lot of people, then I want you to invite someone into connection with you. You be the inviter. I wouldn't be where I am today if I didn't have people in my life who invited me to connect. So here's the invitation. I want you to pray. I want you to ask the Lord, what are you saying to me in this? How do you want me to connect? And then how do you want me to respond? That's the invitation. Because together, we connect. Can we say prayer? Lord, I'm so thankful. I'm so thankful for who you are, that you invite us into connection, that's the thing that you came to build. Not just people who show up and leave or people who just kind of are trying to check a box, but Lord, you're trying to transform lives. You're trying to help us learn what it means to be made in the image of God, who love others the way that you've loved us. As we learn to love you and quite frankly, as we learn to love ourselves. Lord, I am so thankful for the people who saw me and wanted to connect with me. Lord, I'm not who I am without the people in my life. I'm not where I'm at without the people who've connected with me. And Lord, I'm so thankful for the ways that you've called me to connect with others, the people that I've been able to invite in. Lord, I'm so thankful that I have people who I can rally around and who rally around me. And Lord, that I know is your heart for each and every person here. That's your heart for your church. That every person would know that they belong, that every person would have connection, that every person would have someone that they can share life with. Because, Lord, that's what you do with us. You share your life with us. You give your life for us. Jesus, I'm so thankful for all that you've done in my life. Would you help us to be a people who connect, who see those who are not connected and bring invitation? This morning, Lord, I simply say, how would you want me, how would you want each of us to take a step in the direction of connection? Would you speak, Lord? Amen.